Hey y'all, thank you for joining us on First Comes Love, Then Comes Marriage podcast. My name is Lindsay Jackson,
And I'm Aaron Jackson.
and we are so excited for this very special episode. We are joined today with divorce attorney and author Aaron Thomas, author of The Prenup Prescription. And let me tell you, we've been trying to connect for a minute. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so let's just dive right in because we have no time to waste. And you have all the jewels that we're trying to get from you about this topic that, like we said, we know nothing about. So, first things first, as a divorce attorney, tell me, do you believe in love? Do you love love? And tell us your love story.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I am, definitely, a romantic at heart, believe in love. Did not always believe in marriage, and we can dive into that a little bit more.
Okay.
Um, I am happily married to my beautiful wife, who is the mother of my daughter, and our story is we met because she's also a lawyer. We were introduced by a fellow lawyer. She moved here from New York to Atlanta. And we were introduced over Facebook by, this mutual friend. I thought I was doing this friend of mine from law school a favor by going and having dinner and, showing this new lawyer in town, like the legal landscape of Atlanta. I didn't even click through to her Facebook profile. I just saw like in the messenger,
Wow.
we made plans to go get dinner, and then we met up at a restaurant and sat there for 3 hours talking about everything except for our jobs, about life. And we bonded during that conversation over the fact that neither of us believed in marriage at the time, and now here we are, many years later, and we're married ourselves.
Wow. Congratulations. First of all, tell me a little bit more. Why didn't you believe in marriage? Was it just when you were young?
No, well, no, it was I was a divorce attorney, and
Oh,
you know
Okay. I see.
I didn't plan on being a divorce attorney. I kind of got recruited into it. I didn't know anything about it, and then I saw the absolute worst pitfalls, and basically that people were, marriage is like a contract, and people were signing this contract without knowing what it meant. And people didn't find out what it meant until they went divorced. And so I was like, just throw a party instead. Just, just moving together. Don't I still wanted, children and to grow old with somebody. It was the legal concept of marriage
mhm.
that, I had a hard time wrapping my mind around.
Wow. And we've talked about it being a business before, but growing up in the church, we didn't look at it, marriage, as that aspect until recently when
Yeah,
we,
as we got older, we was like, this because we grew up together, so we've known each other all our lives. But like after we got married, it was like, this is we are partners. This
yeah.
is a partnership, and like all the decisions, we are the chairmans of the board with all the decisions. Now that we have our children, we have three children now. It's like every decision is like we have to go to the board, we have to discuss with this. So it's a very interesting thing.
But that's
And
a different way to look at marriage than originally when you start, you're like, this is
the
love.
fantasy, yeah.
This is that's how we started.
So
Yeah.
this season, Aaron, is we're doing cliches. We're doing relationship cliches, and this is the perfect one for divorce lawyers. So we're so happy to have you. It's the cliche that we always heard. I mean, I've heard this throughout my life, and it's cheaper to keep her. So that's the name of this episode. It's cheaper to keep her, and I've
And I
heard.
don't like it. I already don't like it because this is like it's cheaper to keep her. Like, okay, I'll keep this one. But we want to hear from you. Tell me what you think about this cliche. Have you heard it before?
Yeah, of course. Everybody's
Okay.
heard that cliche. I mean, how do I feel about it? Slightly offensive. I mean, I'm in Atlanta,
See? Thank
so
you.
this phrase could just as easily be, how about is the budget trimmed when you drop him? You could also
Okay.
you could also flip
Okay.
it,
I've
right?
never heard that one.
But I mean, to answer like the question seriously, yeah, I mean, it's always going to be financially advantageous to stay married because you have a finite amount of income it can either support one household or it can support two households. Like, which of those is better? So, absolutely. Like, if, I say that marriage is the most important financial contract you'll ever sign in your life. I love that you guys are looking at it like a partnership, because it is. It is a legal partnership. It's a financial partnership. Obviously, it's a love partnership, and that's where it all starts. But, it comes with an automatic contract attached to it. So,
Mhm.
yeah, must be taken into
So
account.
we're talking about prenups, what is a prenup and pros and cons of a prenup?
Yeah, no, and like perfect question to start with. What is it, right? Because it is probably one of the most misunderstood topics out there. So a prenup is basically just a set of rules that defines your financial relationship with your spouse, both during and, if necessary, after marriage. And the reason that I, like to make that distinction is, one, most people, they hear prenup and they think it's just about divorce. It's like planning your divorce before the marriage even starts, right? I thought the exact same thing before I started practicing family law, that it was just, it's just you're writing out your divorce decree before things start. But if you really look at a prenup like just the set of rules that defines your financial relationship with your spouse, everybody's got a prenup, right? You either write your own prenup or you are accepting the rules written by the state legislature of wherever you happen to live. So you have your own prenup, or you have what I call the default prenup. There's both a set of rules. And so certainly there are reasons why prenup have the reputation that they have, because a lot of them have been used, just by, you think of like the rich old guy trying to keep his money away from some young gold digger, but they're just a contract. You can put whatever you want in them, and so you can just as easily solidify that your relationship is going to be a 50-50 on everything, the same way that you could, make it so that, like, we're going to have like disparate net worths no matter what. You can lock in inequity or you can lock in equity. And so one of the most powerful uses for a prenup actually is people saying, hey, we're going to be 50-50 on everything we have in our joint names, no matter what. Because in 41 out of the 50 states, courts don't have to split your assets 50-50 if you go through a divorce. They can do a 60-40 or 70-30 based on the subjective opinion of a judge. And a lot of people today are realizing we want to take that power away from a judge, and we are best suited to make our own decision as to what's mine, what's yours, and what's ours.
Okay. But you see how you went towards the end, the finality of a marriage, and you said towards a judge. So if someone is saying, you know what, I'm nervous to do a prenup because that means that I'm still looking at the end of our
Yeah,
marriage.
don't put that evil on me.
Right. What would you say about it? Because essentially, yeah, I mean, yes, like you said, you're either leaving it for the default prenup or you're creating your own, but you're still saying something is going to happen. It's not the same as, yeah. What are you saying?
Yeah. Not necessarily. I mean, so I look at a prenup as having three parts. I have like before the marriage, during the marriage, and after the marriage. And after the marriage is what everybody already knows about, right?
Okay.
But so fun fact, for a prenup to be enforceable in all 50 states, both spouses have to disclose all their assets and debts to each other. We write it into a net worth statement, and we attach it to the back of the agreement. And I call that the before marriage part, because for a lot of couples, that's the first time that they have ever gotten that transparent about their
Right.
finances.
Yes.
I've seen couples who've been married 10, 20 years and they still don't know the details of each other's finances. Sometimes they don't even know where each other bank.
Right.
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 So just having that one act of transparency is helpful to couples, because it forces certain conversations, like no judgment zone. This is where we are, how did you acquire that amount of debt? Or how do you have that much in your retirement or savings, either way, but it forces couples to really kind of like bare their souls financially and say, how they got there. And then there is during the marriage. So, we write into the agreements, how are you going to set up your bank accounts? Are you going to do what I call the inside out plan, where all the money goes into the joint account first, and then you each get some spending money that transfers out into your separate accounts? Or are you
Right.
going to do the outside in plan, where your incomes go into your separate bank accounts, and then you contribute to a joint bank account that pays for the joint expenses, either, pro rata with your incomes, or are you going to do 50-50? Like, how are you setting up your bank accounts? And then, we go into, all sorts of things like, basically, the way that I look at a prenup is, I from all the hundreds of divorce cases that I did over the years, what are the things that broke people up when they talked about money? And
Mm.
then we try to reverse engineer solutions for those problems and we write them into prenups, right? So, one thing is, lack of communication about the finances. And so we have this idea of having an annual shareholders meeting. And I love that you guys, we're already talking about the business partnership because I wear this business analogy out in my book.
Yeah.
Because for example, every couple's got a CFO. Who's the spouse who like makes the spreadsheets for fun,
Yes.
like that loves doing that.
Organized. Yep.
Right. And everybody always knows. They always point because everyone always knows who's the CFO is. But a CFO in a corporation doesn't mean they get to make all the decisions. It doesn't mean they're the dictator over the money. They work in service to the corporation, right? So they tally the numbers, they bring them back, and then the decisions are made by the board. And so I talk about having an annual shareholders meeting where you have an agenda and you sit down and you're going to talk about, what were our incomes? What was the spending from last year? Were there any big surprises? And then can we take that information and plan for the year ahead? And look at our insurance, look at our subscriptions. Is it time to combine our Netflix accounts? Are we getting that serious? And having a time to specifically to sit down and talk about these things during the marriage itself. So there's a lot that you can put into a prenup that has nothing to do with divorce and has more to do with, how are you going to manage money during the marriage itself. Another quick example, if I can, is, we would see that couples would, they would have a fight and one spouse would suggest counseling. And the other spouse would take it as like some kind of like indication that they thought something was wrong with them. So they would shut down the idea of counseling. And then spouse number two would come around to the idea of counseling, and spouse number one had already given up on the counseling or maybe even on the relationship itself. And so what we found is that if we include in the prenup a provision that says, if either spouse wants to go to counseling, you're going to go to counseling. And you got to do a minimum of 3 sessions. Either spouse can trigger this provision once a year. Then it doesn't feel punitive, right? We're just agreeing that like, if either one of us says it, we're going to go already. We have a method for how we're going to choose the counselor. And that way you don't have to wait until your relationship is on death's door to go to counseling. You can kind of work it into your partnership agreement from the very beginning. And now, like, all right, instead of waiting until we're at a 2 out of 10, if we're at a 7, can we go to some counseling sessions to try to get back to a 9? Like, let's work out some problems here. So those are just a few examples of how I think prenups can be used for the betterment of a relationship.
It was it's interesting because one of the things you said about like the shareholders meeting or the board meeting, Lindsay and I, we don't necessarily go over financials over the year, but on our anniversary dinner is our annual meeting. We it's mostly like a mental check-in, physical check-in with each other. Like, hey, how was last year?
The year for you? How did it go?
Yeah.
And things like
But
that.
adding the financials, like I never thought to be like, how was your spending last year and stuff like that. So that's actually a good tidbit because we could add that on.
We should add it on. And just like you're saying, like I have heard the number one reason for divorce is money. And then second is like kids or something like that. So with us, it's not that we don't talk about money because we definitely do a monthly budget, but that is not always in consideration, like with what you're saying. And that's, good points. I love that there's counseling before even the discussion of a divorce. So that way it's like a little bit more to a prenup than just money, than just the finance part of it, which I know is a huge portion. So.
Oh yeah. No, it's a huge portion because just like you said, it's like the number one thing that breaks couples up, unilateral spending, right? So my prenup, my wife and I put a rule in there that says neither one of us can spend more than $500 from any joint account without discussion.
500. We had the same thing.
Ours is not that high.
Ours was 300. We said it was 300 when we first got married. We haven't renegotiated it or anything, but it was like don't spend $300 without just checking in with me first. And we don't have a prenup,
Yeah,
but that was just
yeah,
something
was
that
the
we
thing.
talked
Because
about.
I don't like spending money. So like when I see a number, it could be for me, it could be a gift for me or something like that. I'm just like, what money? And so we were like, yo, we had to come to that
Because
agreement.
I'll spend it. And
Yeah,
I was
she was
like,
like,
I mean, the shoes are
yeah, the other day,
350.
the other day I called her like, hey, I put some stuff in the Amazon cart. Can
did.
you just buy it for me? Because like once it gets to a certain number, I'm like, I don't like.
It's too much.
You got a mental block.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
That's great.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
knew before, or did you adjust your prenup during the marriage? Like,
No, we did this before. I mean, at this point, you know, when we got married, I'd already done hundreds and hundreds of divorce cases, and I was looking to like, I want to stay married. I'm like anybody else, you know, I want my marriage to last. And so I was writing everything into my prenup that could basically circumvent the potential pitfalls that I saw my clients go through over the years, you know. And if we had to go back, we would almost certainly make it $250 instead of like 500. But now we discuss expenses that are way below the 500 limit because it's just like our normal practice. And I think it's actually bled out into other parts of our relationship because now we've been exercising this muscle of like, we check in with each other before making decisions that impact the other person. And so, yeah, it certainly started with, you know, like spending limits, but, you know, it's for other decisions as well. You know, like I want to get this, you know, new piece of furniture, you know, in the house, you know, but like, let me check in, you know, even if I buy it from my own personal money, you know, that is something that impacts my wife, you know, let's have a conversation about it first. So,
okay.
one of
yeah.
my things, because I know you're the founder of the website, was it
Prenups.com.
Yeah, prenups.com.
Yes.
And so with all your cases, how like did you say to yourself like, if only these people had a prenup? Or was that the thing that out of all like the hundreds of cases you were like, you know what the common thing is to make this a little bit smoother for everybody? A prenup, was that like an epiphany moment? And how did the website come about?
That is exactly where it came from. Is so many of my clients, you know, really could have benefited from so many of my clients just wanted to do like 50-50 and walk away. And the prenup would have been like the perfect thing for them at the beginning of their marriage when like, you know, you love each other and everybody's fair. It's much easier to like get on the same page about, you know, like doing 50-50 than, you know, the default prenup basically says you have to decide who owns what when you hate each other. I mean, guess how that goes, you know? And instead, like people should recognize that they're entering into a financial partnership at the beginning and be clear, particularly in today's day and age. You know, it's one thing for our parents and grandparents when like everybody got married at age 20 and 21 and they're starting from complete scratch and nobody had a dime to their name and they build everything together. Today, the average couple gets married, you know, like at age 29 or 30. And so, you know, that couple is likely to have, you know, 4 to 5 bank accounts each, 3 or 4 credit cards each, a couple retirement accounts, you know, a vehicle, a stake in a condo, you know, a stake in a small business. And, you know, like in the 60s, couples got married and it was like a startup. Today, people get married, it's like a corporate merger, you know, and you would never go into something that serious without like, you know, can we be clear about like, you know, the retirement account that I'm bringing in, is that going to be joint or is it just mine? You know, and like, what about the contributions that I make during the marriage itself? And the hardest divorces were the people that didn't understand the rules of their state for what's like marital property and what's separate property. And they'd say, but I had that retirement account before the marriage and I'm the only one who contributed to it. And it was with my money. And then I have to explain to them, your very paycheck during the marriage is considered marital property. So if you use your paycheck during the marriage to contribute to that retirement account you had coming in, or to pay down the mortgage of that rental property that you own coming in, even if your spouse has never been in it or even seen it, it's now marital property and it's up for division. And those people would be shocked. Imagine going through your entire adult life, 20 years, thinking that this retirement account that you've been diligently saving for and your spouse doesn't contribute anything to retirement. You've always been like, well, that's okay, because if anything happens, like, at least I got my retirement. And then you get to the end of a 20, 30-year marriage and you realize you got to split it in half with somebody who didn't contribute to the retirement. And that's because people enter into this financial partnership without reading the contract. Marriage is the most important financial contract you'll ever sign in your life, and nobody reads it. And that's why I'm so passionate about like working with people to draft agreements so they know what it is they're entering into on the front end and they
Yeah.
can get clear. And if they want to have rules about, hey, we're both going to max out, we're going to sit down every December, we're going to talk about our retirement contributions, and we're both going to max it out. So that they don't end up in these heartbreaking, devastating situations that I saw. And I think that, not only would it prevent uh messy, expensive, long divorces,
Mm-hmm.
but that if done correctly, it can help save some marriages itself because we are taking some of the most common fights that couples have off the table by giving them a framework to resolve these issues before they arise.
Mm-hmm. I can hear your passion. Can you talk a little bit about what happens when children come into play? Like, is there a process when you're married, say, you have a prenup, but as you go along in the marriage and then you have children, what is it like? Do you go back to see the attorney or to redraft this? Is it postnup? Like, tell me more a little bit about what that's about, how that works.
Yeah, so a prenup or a postnup, which is basically the same thing as a prenup after the date of the marriage, can cover anything that has to do with, asset division, who owns what, what's mine, what's yours, what's ours, as well as alimony. You can kind of predetermine alimony or put a formula in there for how it's going to be calculated. But you cannot address anything with child custody or child support
Oh, you
in a
got in
prenup.
there.
Okay.
Yes. And
Oh,
the reason for that is, say you like agreed on the front end, like, oh, we're going to be 50-50, parents, if whatever happens, we'll do week on, week off. Well, that may make sense, at the time that you sign the agreement, but somebody can fall into drug addiction. They can, like become abusive. They
Yeah,
can,
that's a good view.
yeah, they can lose their mind, they can become mentally ill. And so the court is always, the state is always going to want to maintain the ability to do what is right in that moment in time when it comes to custody. And then
oh,
child support is heavily dependent on like who has the kid, how much of the time, and your incomes at that point in time. So you can't predetermine that either. But what you can do is like write in, things like, if we split up and we have kids that are under 18, we're going to do some co-parenting counseling. Before either one of us is allowed to file for divorce, we're going to go do some co-parenting counseling and like try to work out some issues and work with a professional to try to determine, what is going to be best for the kid. And so, I'm all about, anything that keeps people as far away from a courtroom as humanly possible.
yes. Yes.
Is
And
my
I hear it's a little bit of something that you've had experiences with divorces. Could you just share in your experience the process of divorce and like you're saying, why you want to stay away from it as much as possible? So even helping people to say, you know what, maybe you don't want to get married. If there is a hint that you might get a divorce because of how you're speaking about divorce being so extreme.
a messy divorce is best avoided at all costs.
Mm.
They last on average over a year. In the post-COVID days when courts got backed up, a year and a half.
Oh,
They
wow.
cost on average over $15,000 per spouse. And it is not unusual in my career to see couples spend 25% of their net worth on the litigation to fight over who gets the majority of the other 75%. And
Mm.
there are definitely couples who get to a point where they're so frustrated where they're like, you know, just give it all to the lawyers. Let's just give it all to the lawyers, rather than let the other person have it. And because in 41 out of 50 states, the court doesn't have to split your assets 50-50, they have to split them equitably, which means they can take into account, what was each spouse's contributions to the relationship, financial and non-financial. They can take into account infidelity and all these things. And, there's this weird thing that happens in relationships where, even if you're in like a 50-50 relationship, each spouse is doing like, objectively pulling their weight. Each spouse feels like they're doing 2/3 of the work. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
have you noticed
Yeah.
that, like, because we all see what we do ourselves. And like most of what our spouse does is like invisible to us. And so it's very easy, when you get to this place, and you can't stand each other to be like 50% ain't enough. I did this, and this, and they were this kind of person. And you're telling me like the judge will consider all of this stuff. And so, you know, that's how so many people get caught up in these divorce cases where they're like, can we just split everything 50-50 and walk away? And if one person doesn't want to do that, they can drag it out. And now you're in years of litigation and paying lawyers the equivalent of a mortgage payment every month. And, you know, divorce is already hard enough. It's the end of a relationship you thought was going to last the rest of your life, you know? And then that's just the divorce from the relationship. Then there's the divorce, meaning the lawsuit that gets filed with the court. And it is so difficult emotionally, you know, financially, the impact on children. You know, you just went in court and trashed each other, and now you're supposed to co-parent, you know, and raise like a family together.
Yeah.
And you know, if you can do anything to avoid it, even if it means like having a couple awkward conversations at the beginning of your marriage about like, you know, what's in the joint pot and what's outside the joint pot. Just say what you think would be fair. You know, just a hypothetical, say what you think would be fair. And if you agree, if you both say the same thing, put it in an agreement, sign it, and you can take that issue off the table for the rest of time. But if what you say would be fair is not the same, then it's also good because now you have the opportunity to try to address it and see if you can resolve it. But either way, you're better off having this conversation at the beginning of your relationship, you know, and it's mind blowing to me that like we can you know, hope for the best and plan for the worst in every other area of our lives, you know, like, you know, I get car insurance, but I'm not going to drive recklessly because of it. You know, I'm still going to drive safe. I get life insurance, but you know, I'm not bungee jumping and skydiving. You know, I get health insurance, but you know, I'm like still trying to, you know, keep myself healthy. Like we can get marriage insurance, we can get, you know, insure ourselves against a messy divorce and still like try to have a happy marriage. You know, you can plan for divorce without planning to divorce. And
That's good. It makes sense. It's almost like a superstition. People don't want to talk about it or touch it because it means I'm buying into it. But just like you said, planning for it doesn't mean that it might happen and all of the things. So,
and I was thinking about how like there is a stigma with prenup. When you hear prenup, one is like you have to have money to have a prenup. That's like one of the biggest stigmas. Like if we were like 27,
when you're 27,
if you would have came up to me like, oh yeah, we need to do a prenup, I would be like, what? Like
did you have a job? You just got a job.
I had a job. Yeah, I was like a waiter.
Job. So, you know, we're like, oh, how are you
yeah, and so that's one of the things. And I think the other thing, especially because a lot of like we're millennials, we're influenced by TV. When I hear about like prenup, I think about like episodes where the friend says, "Hey, make sure you sign a prenup," and like that friend is the black sheep friend who's saying, "Yeah, make sure you sign a prenup," and you're like, "What? Why are you doing that?" So it's stigmatized, and so how do you think? Especially you have your book and you also have the website, but how do you get the word out there? It's just like, hey, like it. Prenups are for lovers, basically, too.
Change the whole mind around it.
Yeah. I mean, that is, you know, one conversation at a time. I'm trying to reframe this. And, you know, it's a shame that the prenups that make the news are the ones that like leaves one person a multimillionaire and the other person, you know, like destitute on the streets because so many couples could be using them to like just like solidify equality in their relationship and like make sure they're on the same page and avoid the like very predictable and preventable fights about money that, you know, plague so many couples relationships. And so you know, I look at them as the partnership agreement for your marriage. And you know, that is the rebranding that has to take place to, you know, rich people aren't the only people that can benefit from, you know, this kind of contract that I think really has the ability to strengthen people's relationships and give them the security of knowing, you know, exactly where they stand from a financial and legal standpoint. And, you know, you're making these decisions rather than a judge who is a complete stranger to you. You know, if God forbid your relationship doesn't last for the rest of your life, which we know for 40% of people, you know, it doesn't. I mean, you know, if you had a 40% chance of getting in a car wreck, it would be very easy to sell you car insurance. But like nobody thinks it's going to happen to them. And, you know, like you said, you don't want to jinx it. But like, you know, I think that like awkward conversations are like practice for married life anyway, because you're gonna have to have some sticky conversations if you're gonna be married for the rest of your life anyway. So we might as well start it now.
This is so good. It kind of reminds me of premarital counseling, almost like when we talked about this last season, just going in front of somebody and having them ask you those questions that maybe you didn't think of, but that are maybe tough questions, and all the things that you need to work out before entering into this huge contract. But I mean, this was such a blast of honesty and reality that you've given us right now.
I never even thought about prenups
in this way,
because I'm like, divorce, no, but this, like, it makes
that's our
so
growing.
much sense.
That's the way that we grew up.
Yeah.
So
that's, man.
Okay, so what we want to do now is get your gem before we say thank you, your gem that you would give to married individuals or people looking to get married. Like, what would be something that you would give to them as a little nugget?
Yeah. I would say that it is, it's never too late to, ensure that you and your spouse are on the same page, when it comes to your finances, whether it's, sitting down and, making sure you're on the same page, like mine, yours, ours, like if everything is ours, okay, like let's just be explicit about that, the spending limits, having, the annual shareholders meeting for your household, like, not everyone is going to run out and get a postnup, tomorrow. And that's okay, but you could certainly start with like one of these tips, like instituting, the shareholders meeting for your own household, appointing the CFO, laying bare all of your finances, out on the table, like create that net worth statement, and start making it a regular part of the conversations that you have in your household.
Thank you. Okay, I always do this. One more question though. I know you told me not to, but do you suggest that couples actually have a joint bank account? This is one of those questions and topics that people are kind of controversial about. It's like, should we join our money? Do you think that that's something that they should do?
I say yes. Yeah. I think that the best situation is having, 3 money buckets is what I call them. So you've got the joint account, and the joint account just pays for the joint expenses. And then each spouse has their own bank account, and, the money can flow either direction. It can go in or it can go out. But that way you have visibility and transparency on like what the joint finances look like. Both people see how the bills get paid. If somebody's like unconscious for a week, the whole thing doesn't come crashing to the ground. And you also get best of both worlds. You get the autonomy that comes with having your own spending money. So, you're not arguing, oh, my wife can like go out to eat for lunch every day and I can get the new iPhone every year. And we don't drive each other crazy with our different spending habits because that's happening from our separate buckets. So I say yes, joint account, but yes, also separate accounts as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Was good.
Oh my goodness. This has been so fantastic, Aaron. Thank you so much. Now, if people want to reach out to you, and how would they do it? Would you offer some advice and things of that sort?
Yeah, absolutely. You can obviously find me at the website, prenups.com. And I'm on the social media channels. I am Prenup Guy.
Prenup Guy.
Prenup Guy.
And what's the name of your book? I think it's behind you, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. The name of the book is The Prenup Prescription: Meet the Premarital Contract Designed to Save Your Marriage.
And it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere?
It is everywhere books are sold. Yes. Amazon, Apple Books, all of the places.
Yes, I am actually looking forward to the read because, again, this is a topic that we were not introduced to growing up. Like, our parents didn't talk about it. It was shh, and so this is just good knowledge, especially because we have children and we want to set them up for success as well. So thank you again for joining us. It has been our honor just to learn from you. And
well, you want to do the outro? Let's do the outro.
Let's do it. Okay, you communicate with us, engage with us, tell us what you think. First Comes Love, TCM, Instagram or TikTok.
Subscribe to the YouTube at First Comes Love.
And email us, let's talk at firstcomeslove, thenComesMarriage.com. See you next Friday.